Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the community benefits session. Today, we're talking about community benefits and turning those into net zero action. We've got a great lineup of speakers here today. Got myself, I'm going to just introduce a bit of the care support that we have available for community benefits projects. We've got Lindsay Dougan from SSE Renewables, Carol Masheter from Soirbheas, and B. Jefferson from Foundation Scotland. I'm just letting a few people in from the lobby as they come, so bear with me for a sec. Okay. So I just wanted to share, hopefully some of you saw this slide this morning if you joined in the morning plenary, but it's just to kind of share with you the goal for CARES. CARES is the Scottish Government's Community and Renewable Energy Scheme. And our goal is to have communities across Scotland engaging, participating and benefiting in the energy transition to net zero. Our support is there to help communities with their involvement in shared ownership projects, in local energy system projects, contributing to Scotland's 2 gigawatts by 2030 target. That's 2 gigawatts of community and locally owned energy by 2030, and maximising the impact from community benefits, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And we deliver CARES for the Scottish Government. We provide a range of grant and loan funding through our team, our resources and our funding. You can see on the slide there. So just for those of you that are joining that maybe don't have much experience of community benefits, these are a package of benefits that renewable energy businesses might offer to communities that are within an agreed area of benefit for that renewable development. It's really important to say that these are voluntary arrangements and they're not material in any planning applications. Our support for community benefits starts with the Scottish Government's good practice principles. So we try and encourage renewable energy businesses to follow the principles and also signpost communities to these as well. The principles promote a national level of community benefits at £5,000 per megawatt installed per year for the lifetime of the project. And the principles also recognise that these packages of benefits can be a bit more wide than perhaps they were thought of in the past. Often they were thought of as a fund, whereas now we tend to see more wide packages of benefits going to communities as well. The principles also place a big focus on creating a lasting legacy for communities and making sure that there's a well-developed community action plan as well that helps to set communities' priorities, goals and aspirations for their area. The care support available comes in a range of different ways. Of course, we've got our development officers that are there to help you every step of the way on your renewable project journey. We also have a toolkit which is available to support as well. This is on our website. It was developed for us by Foundation Scotland, and it goes through kind of every stage of the community benefits journey that you could really think about, from very early stages of engaging your community, engaging the developer, how you might go about community action planning, right the way through to monitoring and evaluation at the end. So if you are thinking of embarking on a project involving community benefits, it's definitely worth a look through the toolkit. It is quite lengthy, so has been designed for you to kind of dip into the bits that are relevant to you at the time that they're relevant for you. The toolkit also comes with a number of tools, things like the Community Benefit Fund Agreement template, which has been really useful for a lot of groups that are seeking an agreement with a developer on community benefits. We also have an enablement grant to help support your work as well, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So the enablement grant is up to £25,000. It's there to help communities to really set out their aspirations. Mostly this is through community action plans. We funded a few of those for communities. And it could also be for the support for setting up and securing community benefit funds, or community benefit, working with developers on community benefit packages. And it's open to applications at any time. It's not one of the funds that's linked to a particular funding call. So you can come to us anytime, speak to your local development officer, and they can help you through the process. I also wanted to plug the Community Benefit Register. This is a really useful resource. It's a mine of information, really. There's so much information on there. Developers do regularly update when new projects are added. They'll put on the details of community benefits that they are offering to communities. And we've got a lot of case studies linked to these projects as well. Some of the case studies are on our website and some are on developers' websites or communities' websites. I'd like to say it's not just developers that can update the information on this map. Also communities can as well. So if you're involved in a project, you can go in and update the details about what you spend your community benefits on, how much community benefits you're accessing through the map. It's quite easy to do. There's an online form, or you can just email us in the details and we can update it for you. And it's amazing because we can see the impact that it's having across Scotland. Over £22 million is an incredible sum of money that's going to communities across Scotland every year. And the more information we get on the map, the bigger the impacts that we can show are happening. And this is just our case study section of the website, just to see that we do have a community benefits area. So you can go in and you can find out about what other communities have been doing, and some of the funds and things that are available out there, and sharing some of the good practice from those. That's it for me. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm going to pass on to our speakers now, who will get more onto the topic of community action to net zero from community benefits. So Lindsay, if you'd like to kick us off, that would be great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Just 2 seconds, I'll get my slides up. Hi everybody, I really appreciate the time today to talk to you about community benefit. Can I just check everybody can see my slides okay?
Yes, that's great.
Perfect, great, thank you. So as Laura kindly introduced, I'm Lindsay Dougan. I'm one of the community investment managers who work for SSE Renewables. We are one of Europe's largest developers of renewable infrastructure. We work across Great Britain and Ireland, and actually you might see in the news today, we've signed an agreement for Japan as well, but we take our responsibilities as a developer very seriously. We're thinking not only about the environmental responsibilities that we have, the economic responsibilities, but also those to communities, and we have committed to reinvesting part of our profits back into those local communities and follow the Scottish Government good practice principles. To give you a flavour of the size and scale of our delivery, our current programme in Great Britain and Ireland is worth £300 million over its lifetime, and we have 58 local funds. Now, these are the funds that we set up that go to the communities nearest to our renewables infrastructure, and those funding decisions are made by panels of local people. So it varies, a local empowerment model, and also by local trusts. And then we have 6 regional funds because we wanted to share the benefits of our community benefit across wider regions. So we have funds that are open at a local authority level and support larger, more transformational projects. And we deliver those in the Highlands, in South Lanarkshire, Scottish Borders, Perth and Kinross, Dumfries and Galloway, and also in North Lincolnshire. But what I've been asked today to talk about is what we're doing around net zero projects. Now, that's something that as a business we take a lot of responsibility. It's a key focus. It's one of our main priority areas. As a business, we are looking at how we decarbonise the power sector. So we're looking at things like power capture, carbon capture in Peterhead. We are currently set out our ambition to develop a stored hydro system at Corrie Glass. We've also made our commitments viable that we want to treble our renewable output by 2030. And this has involved supporting the construction of over 5 gigawatts of on and offshore renewable energy in the last year alone, which, when you consider that it was through a pandemic, is really quite a large scale. For example, I think Japan as a country only have 10 gigawatts in total at the moment. And then we've further shown our support of net zero and the importance that we think it has to the world by being a COP26 sponsor. And we're focusing on that for when it comes to Glasgow this year. But our community funds have also been recognising the importance of net zero and what that plays for our future. We have been completing community consultations in a number of our host communities so that we can understand what are the community's priorities around the net zero future and where do they want us to focus our funding. We have been prioritising our investment so that it focuses on projects that support a net zero future. For example, next month we are due to launch our Sustainable Development Fund, which is our regional fund that covers the Highlands region, and net zero focused projects will be a priority area for us there. We also recognise that this journey that we're going on towards net zero is new for many communities, and we've been supporting communities in terms of increasing their understanding and capacity to deliver the types of projects that we need in a net zero future. And we've also been supporting testing new approaches. Now, we recognise that testing something comes with a risk. These projects may not deliver, but there is the opportunity to test how we can deliver new types of programmes for net zero that might be rolled out across other communities. And I'm just going to take you through a couple of examples of what types of projects we have funded in the past which support the net zero ambition. The first is an area that we get a lot of focus on, and it's for communities that want to take their own responsibility for renewables. So, for example, the community that you see in the picture here is Raasay, the island of Skye, and we've given them over £300,000 worth of support to develop their own community-owned hydro programme. And that will give the island a stable source of electricity that they can use to grow their ambition and their economy. We've also been working a lot with communities where community organisations own assets within their community to look at how we can improve the power source for those properties. So we've been helping communities in terms of getting solar powered assets onto their facilities. We've been looking at how we improve the energy supply that they have. We've been looking at how they improve their heating systems. And then we have also been looking at a community level of how do we overcome some of their key challenges, particularly around the housing stock and fuel poverty, for example, in the Republic of Ireland. We've been doing a big project in Galway where we've been helping homes to improve their energy efficiency and the insulation for those homes. We have also been considered, we know that one of the key risks, and particularly in rural areas within Scotland, is the quality of our housing. We've kind of got a double-edged sword where the housing stock we do have is potentially not fit for the future, but there's also a shortage of housing supply for local people. So we've been supporting local organisations that have been committed to building more homes dedicated for local people. And when they're doing that, we're making sure that they are improving the housing quality so that they're using the most efficient technologies that are available, and they will create a very low carbon solution for the local people that choose to live there. And the example here is Fort Augustus within the Great Glen, who we've supported with £1 million to invest in a new housing development that will be owned by the community. Transport is another area it's a big focus for our local communities. The example in the picture is an organisation called Gurkha, and I won't go into huge details of that because Carol from Soirbheas, who's a speaker after me, knows it much in more in depth than I do. But what we're supporting communities to be doing is one is to be thinking about decarbonising their fleet. So there's a lot of movement to community vehicles becoming electric. We've been having to help communities to understand what they need in terms of publicly available charging points for electric fleets. We've been helping communities to understand what are their needs for non-vehicle related transport. So for example, a lot of that has been improving the infrastructure around key community assets so that children can walk to school safely, that we can move a lot of foot-based and cycle-based provision off the main roads and onto secure paths that are available for the community. Another area, as I talked about earlier, is about testing innovation, and this is seeing what new approaches can be delivered to help us as we look forward to net zero. We don't have all the solutions at the moment, so we need to be looking at what are some new models, what can we replicate from other countries. And the example in the picture is Plastic at Bay, which are at the very top of Sutherland, and there's a particular issue with marine pollution in that area because of the way that the tides are working. So we've supported Plastic at Bay to develop a scheme that was developed in the Netherlands, but they have moved it across here where they can collect the marine pollution and the plastic that can't be recycled through normal means. They have a specialist machine that had been developed in the Netherlands that allows that plastic to be broken down and to be turned into other resources. Now they can be used for craft kind of material that can be resold to the population, but they can also be used as resources that are in major construction projects. For example, the components can be used for the production of roads. So that gives a really unique approach to how do we minimise the plastic waste that some of our communities are facing. And then the final area I was going to use as an example is what we also recognise as we move to net zero is there is going to be a change in the types of jobs that will be available within the future. So we currently are building Doggerbank Wind Farm, which will be the world's largest offshore wind farm. And what we have chosen to do with the community benefit there is consult with local stakeholders, and we have prioritised the investment during construction to help enhance the STEM educational attainment within local areas in a recognition that STEM-based jobs are going to be particularly important for young people as they live in a net zero world. So that's kind of quite an innovative approach to how you can deliver community benefits. And then I'll just leave you with my contact details. I'm happy if anybody's got any questions, then happy for you to drop me an email afterwards. And also on our website, we have a whole section dedicated to all of our different community funds. And we also annually produce a community investment review, which demonstrates how every pound of our investment has been spent across the different communities, and it'll give you some great examples of the types of projects communities are working on for net zero. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lindsay. It was great to hear about the Sustainable Development Fund and all the different projects that it's helping to support. Carol's being one of them, so we'll bring Carol in next to present a bit more about what Soirbheas are doing. Thanks.
Hi everybody, thank you for inviting me along. Hopefully you can see the slides up on screen.
Yes, all good.
Great. Okay, so my name is Masheter. I'm the Community Development Manager for Soirbheas, the charity that covers Glenorchet and Strathglass. We are not a development trust, but we do community development work, and we work in association with the two development trusts in our area, and Gurkha is one that's already been mentioned, and then Strathglass Community Company as well. So just a quick background on us and where we are. So the little green blob on the map is the Glenorchet and Strathglass area that we cover. So our main communities are Drummadrochet and Kanek, and we have been established since 2009, but weren't receiving community benefit funds at that stage. So we've built up to that point, and I'll talk about our funding a little bit further down the line. So it's a relatively large geographic area, but small populations with sort of 2,700 to 2,800, always growing at the moment, with lots of housing going on in Drummadrochet. But we are predominantly a rural area. So our key objectives for the charity, which were set with our loan agreement with Social Investment Scotland, were making the region greener, enhancing the attractiveness of the area for economic growth and investment, improving the quality of life for existing residents, and reducing fuel poverty. So those are key, and they're woven into our grant programmes. So just to give you kind of flavour of sort of levels of funding we've been working with, we aren't a hugely wealthy charity, but our funds have increased, and that's allowed us to increase our grant programmes. So we started off with very modest grant programmes, and that funding first started coming into the community from Corrimony Wind Farm, which was our first investment. And that was in April 2014. We set up our two grant programmes, which at the time Tier 1 was just up to £500, recently increased, and then our Tier 2 programme up to £10,000. And then after our support from SSE, we were able to launch our apprenticeship grant programme. That's funding from the Blady Wind Farm, which was launched in 2017 and has now supported 5 apprenticeships in our area, and then launched most recently our capital programme, which launched in 2018 when we were able to build up enough reserves, which has recently increased to 50,000 from 30,000, which allows us to support more legacy type projects. So on top of the grant programmes, we have recently introduced development support days. We have increased our staff capacity to allow us to do this, which means that the groups that we're working with on bigger projects, or even wanting to kickstart a new initiative, can come to us for support. And that's just not funding, but for our time. So myself and my colleague, depending on which skill set, will offer support to that group. And it might be something very simple, like getting their group set up and helping develop their constitution, or to something more strategic and sourcing funding, helping them with developments of share offers. So the two examples. But here, the share offer launch for Loch Ness Hub, which was the project that Lindsay talked about. And then currently we're working on the community action plan for Glenorchet, which has been supported by CARES funding as well. So that's the process of now we have this very established network of organisations working away. We need to prioritise the projects that are coming through from the community, because demand is massive on what the community are expecting us all to deliver. So we need to be confident that we're delivering projects that have the best outcomes for the community and most needed. Now to take you on to a few of the projects that we have supported through our grant programmes, which help towards net zero. This is one of our earlier projects. This is Kanek Hall in the village of Kanek, which is surrounded by the school children that use the building for their PE facilities. And we put a solar array, supported a solar array being put onto the building. It's an all-electric building, and they were struggling to cover the heat costs in this recently refurbished building. But even though it had been refurbished, the costs were astronomical for their heating. So the solar panels have helped to offset those costs. We then went on to support a grant which was part of our local energy plan. It was identified, we took part in the pilot for local energy planning a few years ago, back in 2018 now, which helped us draw up a kind of holistic approach to how energy should be used in our area. And one of the projects that came out of that was to support the local care centre, which is a daycare centre largely. And they'd already put a solar array onto the building. Their heating costs were quite high. They had a traditional storage heating system in the building, which wasn't as flexible as they needed it to be, and was obviously was heating at wrong times of the day for them, and at the weekends it wasn't possible to turn it off and then turn it back on in time, didn't have that flexibility and control. So they put in a heat capturing system from the kitchen area, because the food is obviously created from the meals in there, and there was a very hot space in the kitchen area, and windows are being opened and that heat was being lost, so that heat is now being recycled into the building, and then a heat pump was put on as well. So working along with them through that process of recognising that they were keen to get their costs down, but also to become more efficient in their building. We've also supported them through lighting, more efficient lighting as well. And this is another project that we work with, the Shieling Project, which is an outdoor education facility in Strathfara, which is a very remote area, just beside, on the road to Kanek, between Stree and Kanek. And this social enterprise had set up and then developed a nursery alongside their other activities, an outdoor nursery. So the children had a very long walk, as you can see up this track, and it was obviously walking very small children up this track was time consuming, and they wanted to be able to improve that without impacting and not driving vehicles up and down this track. So we supported them to purchase 2 e-cargo trikes, which were bespoke built, and you can see that they were even used on very, very snowy days. That day I walked up there to see them. They actually had transported the children up, not up the steep hill, but along the track. So it made a huge difference to the way they could operate. And we reduced staffing time to walk children up and down. The children were safe, and they could jump on and off if they wanted to walk part of the journey. And you can see this is the site that they came to, the building here. So it was very much an outdoor facility, so a great solution. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it's had to close, but we are going to move the 2 trikes to another project based in Drummadrochit to transport the children out to outdoor activities, because it's got first school status. So it will live on, which is great. Again, with the Shieling project, they had also put in some accommodations, the units you can see on the bottom right, to allow them people to come and stay on site in a more comfortable situation, but they had no facilities to allow people to wash or to stay there for longer and wash in any comfort. So they built a toilet block or shower block above, which you can see, and then put in a wood-fired boiler system. So again, we supported that initiative, and it's great to see that up and running. And active travel, Lindsay again touched on this project. So as well as supporting Loch Ness Hub establish and develop a baggage transfer business to support income coming into the business, we were at the same time looking at transport requirements within our community, and that came out of the local energy plan. The emissions in our community were hugely coming from travel and from people moving around our communities, and that was something we felt we needed to tackle. So we did a transport feasibility study, and at the same time we were doing that, Gurkha were looking at purchasing the former Tourist Information Centre in the village, and we came together and we decided that actually, rather than doing these projects in isolation, we would work together. So we've combined, and Loch Ness Hub was created. And the first project that we have done is an e-bike trial project. So we have 4 bikes, you can see here, that go out to the community and let people trial them out. And I think we're up to about 50 odd trials since June now. So people get them for a sort of 2-week period. And we've had an excellent conversion rate from that, for people actually going out and purchasing bikes and thinking about how they can reduce their car usage. So alongside that, there is some digital information at the centre in terms of public transport. So anybody coming into the community any time of day can go and look at when the next bus is moving around, which is great for tourism as well and for local people, because getting hold of public transport information is really challenging in rural areas. So the bikes will then convert to a hire scheme after the trial is finished. So we hope to run the trial through till next spring, and then they will be added to the hire scheme. So the hub has also purchased an additional 4 bikes, which are being hired out by visitors at the moment, and they're both housed in the hangars, which are lockable systems, and we're new to the Highland Council. Nobody had come across these before. So we were kind of always trying to sort of push the boundaries and try new ways of doing things. So alongside the other hangar, we allow people that are living and working in the community to lock their bikes in there safely as well. because obviously car parking is an issue and we want to reduce the amount of people that are coming in and out of the community that could walk or cycle to the area. So we have 2 of these that can be used. I'll just quickly touch on the other things that we try to do around behaviour change and green living. I think somebody mentioned earlier in the conference that we kind of try to embed everything into what we're doing in terms of the behaviour change work and the green living, and the messages are always consistent, and I think we're very much recognised for that we are trying to encourage our communities to become much more sustainable and look at how we live our lives. So we do energy work with young people. We've produced packs for schools, and that's a regular thing that we come back and revisit. Health walk groups are set up, and we're looking at how we can extend that, looking at the potential for a path development officer and walking festivals in our area. Growing projects have been the backbone for us. We've been doing potato growing projects pretty much since we were set up. And on that, building up on other sustainable food types, and we ran food larders during COVID as well in our community. Waste reduction and composting, we do a lot of advocacy work about waste reduction and trying to encourage people to compost and reduce food waste. Thank you for that. That's my details up on screen. Again, if anybody would like to get in touch, there's lots of information on our website, or feel free to contact me directly. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Carol. It's amazing to see just the range of different types of activities and projects you've got going on in your area. So thank you for sharing those with us. Bea, we're going to bring you in now to present about the Vattenfall Fund.
Right, just one moment, I'll get the presentation up on screen. So can I just check, Laurie, you can see that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Good, right. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm a community fund coordinator with Foundation Scotland, and I first just wanted to explain who Foundation Scotland are. We are an independent charity that specialises in grant distribution. And among our work is the management of over 60 community benefit funds. So we're working on behalf of developers and on behalf of communities to distribute funding. And each community fund we manage is probably different, but the one thing they have in common is that they're all very much community-led. So they're focused on priorities as identified by communities. It's communities who make the decisions as to what's done with the grant funding, but we administer the fund. Now, just to put this in the wider context of what Foundation Scotland are doing, we are a signatory to the Funded Commitment to Climate Change, and that means that we put together a package of commitments, including how we integrate climate action into our funds. But it's a lot wider than that. So, for example, we hold a considerable amount of money in endowment funds. So we've changed our investment strategy over the past year quite considerably to make sure those funds are now used for positive impacts. But today I specifically want to talk about what we're doing on the community benefit funds. One of the complexities of integrating climate action into community funds is that the priorities are very much as identified by the local community. So that might be through a community planning exercise. It might be based on the existing community plan. And historically, climate action hasn't always been a major part of community plans. I think that's changing nowadays. But the priorities of a fund are inherently identified by the local community. The fund donor might also have priorities that they wish to integrate in a fund. So one of the funds I'll be talking about is Vattenfall's Unlock Our Future Fund, where the donor Vattenfall has a very clear view as to what the priority should be and has identified climate change as being the key priority. Most our fund donors just tell us things that they don't want us to invest in. So, for example, most of our funds, we won't put money into political activities or religious activities because of the restrictions from the fund donor. Also, we are a registered charity, so that does restrict what we can spend money on because everything we spend has to be in line with charitable objectives. So, for example, we can't fund private businesses, private individuals, unless there is a wider community benefit to those. So we are not in the lead when it comes to priorities for community benefit funds. However, there are things we can do to influence them and make sure low carbon and climate action is embedded in them. So we can share good practice, we can share experiences between funds. We can also look at our systems, how we make sure that carbon impacts, wider environmental impacts are taken into account. So providing guidance, just the sort of questions we ask in our applications, how we assess applications, how we monitor. We've recently brought in a new requirement so that when projects are applying for major refurbishments of buildings, we ask that the applicant now gets an assessment from Zero Waste Scotland, because we see that as part of good project design. It's a free service, so it just makes sense if you're doing a major refurbishment to get that added input to it. We're also just talking to developers, talking to our local panels to just try to get climate action and net zero up the agenda. And a lot of what we're doing has been informed by one particular fund, and that's a fund I manage, which is Vattenfall's Unlock Our Future Fund. This is a fund that is provided by the offshore wind farm that's just off the coast of Aberdeen, and it covers all of Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. So it's actually quite a lot bigger than a lot of the funds we manage. And the priorities were set out by Vattenfall at the start. They based it on a community consultation, but we inherited the priorities, and they're very much about a climate smarter world and long-term legacy. The fund is 150,000 per year. 90% of the fund is for the wider Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire area, but 10% is allocated to a small part of that area where the electricity connection comes ashore. Excuse me. And the fund is now in its third year. There are two grant sizes, so small grants under 2,000 and then up to 30,000 for 3 years. So relatively small if you look at the sort of costs of low carbon projects. It has been very much oversubscribed. We've funded 40 projects so far. And increasingly, we've seen a higher demand for small grants because of a need for flexible small funding sources. Whereas there is a fair amount of money out there for some of the large capital works, there seems to be a definite lack in grants. And we've had a very high level of applications for the wider Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire area, but we have struggled a bit getting applications in for the small area where the electricity connection is. So I think there's been a lesson for us there in having a very much climate focused fund on a very small area. You do need to make sure there is plenty of support for developing projects in that area. I just want to talk about a few of the projects we have funded as part of the Unlock Our Future Fund that I think show particular features of how the community is addressing climate change. This first one is the Aberdeenshire Sailing Trust and the Peterhead Sailing Club. So the Sailing Trust runs sailing activities with youngsters and people with disabilities and disadvantages, and they work from the premises of the Sailing Club. And we've actually given them an award in each year so far of the fund. And the interesting thing is how they've been looking at all their activities and addressing one area at a time. So they started off looking at their transport activities, and we funded an electric van for them. Then they looked at the clubhouse and improved the heating system and the electricity system. And we've just given them an award to trial an electric outboard motor for their rescue boat. Now, electric outboard motors are just not used very widely in the sailing community at all. And there's very little knowledge about them. So the club wanted to just try it out. And this particular project has been very, very good at sharing the lessons from the project. So if this electric outboard works well, they'll be out in the sailing community convincing them that electric outboards are a good idea. And that's one of the features we've seen in this fund. It's more than about the direct carbon savings. It's also about being very visible and showing people and educating people, showing what the community can actually do. And that's also the case from the second example from Fitty. Fitty, also known as Foot D, is a little fishing village right on the edge of Aberdeen Harbour. It's a fascinating place if you're ever in the area. And the community there have redeveloped the Gospel Hall, and we've given them 2 grants, one to fund an air source heat pump and one to fund insulation. Now, you might notice from the years we gave these grants that we really did it the wrong way round, and this was a key learning point for our decision panel on this fund. We should have really encouraged them to do the insulation first and then put in the air source heat pump. But the way in which the guidance for the fund was phrased in the first year actually encouraged applicants to come forward with high-tech solutions rather than just basic things like insulation. So we've actually changed that now. And one feature of this fund has been we're learning and changing things each year. The other interesting thing about this project is that they've been working very closely with an arts project funded by Creative Scotland called Safe Harbour Open Sea. And a group of artists are now based at the hall, looking at creative responses to climate change with the local community. So it's a really nice example of integrating a building and the creative sector and the community together. And again, enhancing the direct impacts through this wider engagement. Now, I'm just going to very briefly mention low carbon transport, because this fund has funded quite a variety of electric vehicles of one sort and another. And what has amazed me is that there is now an electric vehicle for every purpose you can possibly imagine. We funded cargo bikes. The picture you see there is of a sort of utility vehicle that's watering flowers. And once again, the impacts are well beyond the direct impacts of getting a conventionally fueled vehicle off the road. It's also about the public side of things. All the project managers have mentioned how people regularly come up to them to ask about the vehicles. They want to know things like range and how much it costs to maintain. So there's a real sort of educational part of funding electric vehicles in low carbon transport. So just to finish off, key lessons we've learned that we're trying to integrate to our other funds is that if you have a very narrow focus of a fund, such as climate smart activity, it helps to be spreading it over a relatively large geographic area. Because if you go for too small an area, you might be quite limited with the opportunities you have to fund in that objective. But having said that, we have had to manage demand. We've been oversubscribed. So we have had to look at how we can weed out applications that don't fit well at an early stage, so people aren't wasting their time. We've had to look at signposting to other potential funders. We have had to make sure that support is in place for potential applicants. So this is particularly through other organisations such as Local Energy Scotland and Zero Waste Scotland, making sure that potential applicants have their details. We're not experts in developing projects that are low carbon. They are, so we need to put people in touch with the right organisations for support. We've also felt it's very important to just respond to feedback. So we have done quite a lot of consultation. We've also really seen the value of small flexible grants in this funding source, as I said before. The areas where we're still working are really about how we capture the impact, because as I've said, it is beyond the direct carbon impacts. There's also very strong impacts around being visible, around education, but those are a lot harder to actually capture. Also, the other key point is how we roll out the learning from this to our other funds and other developers. And actually today, this morning, I've just been talking to a wider team at Foundation Scotland, how we can do that. So we're making progress on it. Now, if you want further information, there are full case studies of these projects on our website. And there's also a case study of this particular fund on the CARES website. And I'm sure Laura will be able to circulate links to presentations. Thank you. Right, I should just stop sharing.
Thanks. very much. That was a really insightful presentation, and great to hear again about the range of different projects being supported there through community benefit funds. Thanks everyone for listening this afternoon. What I'm going to do now is stop the recording and then open out the session for further chat. So